Welcome back to All Things Creepy. I'm your host, Micah James. And this week it is part 2 of the Russian sleep experiment. This week it's kind of like a little bit of a deeper dive into this creepypasta, kind of just talking about how it affected pop culture, how it came into mainstream, that kind of thing. And it did lead me down the road of looking into sleep deprivation, as well as some sleep experiments, which we'll cover a little bit later. But because it's been a few weeks since I have covered the Russian sleep experiment, here is a very condensed version of what happens in the Russian sleep experiment. So the Russian sleep experiment is about these 5 prisoners of war, POWs, who were basically voluntold they'll be going through this experiment of being kept awake for 30 days with this gas. And if they were able to complete this experiment, they would be given their freedom. However, shit starts happening, and the scientists who are running the experiment cut it short, and it only lasted 15 days, and they all die. At least the prisoners of war died. That's, like I said, that's the very condensed version. If you want, the fuller story with, all the details, I'll be linking the story in the show notes. And you can also just listen to my episode where I do read it to you in case you want, like I said, the less condensed version with all of the details in it. So first we're going to kind of just start with the story itself, just talking about the story itself. So back when it first came out, a lot of people thought oh, maybe it's real, which I don't blame people, because this takes place in the 1940s during World War II, and there were a lot of crazy ass experiments happening, in Germany, Japan. Hell, you can even say that there were crazy experiments happening here in the US as well during World War II. So again, that's kind of lent its credence to it being at least kind of true. But the thing is, this one never happened. There's no proof beyond this pasta of this ever happening. It was originally posted by a user called Orange Soda. It seems possible because there have been scientific studies on sleep deprivation in the 20th century. However, there is no scientific proof that there is any gas or any other substance that can keep someone up for 15 days, never mind 30. There has been drugs known to keep people up for days in general, I think meth is one of them, but like I said, I personally couldn't find any proof that it would keep, any of the known drugs would keep someone up for 15 days. Anyway, and this is something that we'll talk about more in depth a little bit later on. The longest anyone has ever stayed awake is 11 days on top of all of that. It is unknown how long someone can actually survive without sleep, but the effects of deprivation can become apparent around the 48-hour mark. And like I said, the longest anyone has been awake is about 264 hours, which is about 11 days. There have been a few different adaptations. Actually, there's been plenty of adaptations, but there are 3 main ones that are at least somewhat mainstream. There's Subject UH1317, When Science Traces a Deadly Turn. This is a 2019 play based on the creepypasta. Then there are 2 different things titled The Sleep Experiment. The first sleep experiment is a book by Jeremy Bates that was published in July of 2019 and is loosely based on the original. And then there's The Sleep Experiment from 2022, which was a movie written, edited, and directed by John Farley. Now that we've covered kind of the story, like I said, this kind of led me down to researching sleep deprivation and sleep experiments. So let's talk about sleep deprivation in general. So there is an average amount of daily sleep that you need in various stages of life. So for newborns up to 3 months, that's 14 to 17 hours a day. Infants 4 to 12 months need 12 to 16 hours, and this includes a nap. Young children from 1 to 5 years old need 10 to 12 hours of sleep, and this also includes a nap. School-age children from 6 to 12 years old need 9 to 12 hours. Teenagers from 13 to 18 need 8 to 10, and then adults who are 18 plus need 7 to 9. There are 4 different stages in the sleep cycle. Stage 1 is light sleep. This occurs right after falling asleep and takes up about 5% of your sleep time. Stage 2 is deeper sleep and takes up about 45% of your sleep time. Research indicates that this stage is key in memory storage and learning. Stage 3 is the deepest sleep and takes up about 25% of sleep time. This stage is most important to how the body recovers and maintains itself. And finally, restless eye movement, or REM sleep. This is also called the dream state. This is usually where all of your dreams come from. A single dream cycle typically lasts around 90 to 120 minutes, which means most people go through about 4 or 5 sleep cycles each night before they wake up for the day. There's also no evidence that you can die from sleep deprivation by itself, which I think I mentioned a little earlier. It seems like most deaths that occur when it comes to sleep deprivation are more so caused by car and work accidents. Other causes come from other underlying conditions that someone may already have that are worsened from sleep deprivation, like obesity and a weakened immune system, that kind of thing. There are 2 types of symptoms that someone could get. There are just your regular common symptoms, and then there are severe symptoms. Your common symptoms include daytime sleepiness, fatigue, irritability, trouble focusing, thinking, and remembering, slowed reaction times, and headaches. Now, you might get to a point where you are going to experience severe symptoms. These severe symptoms are microsleeps, which means just you fall asleep for a few seconds before you wake up. Uncontrollable eye movements that are very similar to REM eye movements. Trouble speaking clearly. Drooping eyelids. Hand tremors. Visual and tactile hallucinations. Tactile are like the hallucinations that you can feel. Impaired judgment. Impulsive and reckless behavior. I realized I should have said this more so in the beginning, but I am not a medical doctor. If you feel like you are suffering from sleep deprivation, please reach out to your primary care physician, a sleep expert, whatever. Please just reach out to a professional. I am just giving you very baseline information that I was able to find on the internet. So for anything specific, please go see your doctor, or, even a therapist that could hopefully point you in the right direction to get your sleep deprivation in check if you are suffering from this. There are also, much like there are 4 stages of sleep, there are 4 stages of sleep deprivation. In stage 1, this is when you go at least 24 hours without sleep. This is equivalent to being drunk, so it is deemed unsafe to drive. Stage 2, this is where your common symptoms start intensifying and you start experiencing microsleeps and trouble focusing and thinking. Stage 3 is where severe symptoms like hallucinations begin occurring and communication starts to deteriorate. And then stage 4, symptoms become their most severe and you might start having trouble telling what's real and what isn't. All right, so now let's talk about some sleep experiments. Now, there are a lot of sleep experiments out there. These are just ones that I kind of found most intriguing personally. Now, the first one, I couldn't find a proper name to the experiment. So I for this episode, I just called it the beauty sleep experiment. Swedish researchers did a sleep experiment in 2013 to see how people looked after being sleep deprived. The study found that after 31 hours without the proper sleep, people are perceived as less attractive and sadder than those who got proper sleep. The same experiment was recreated in 2017. The 25 participants in this one were perceived as less friendly and less healthy, on top of being seen as sadder and less attractive. And this kind of just makes sense because, like I mentioned in the sleep deprivation symptoms, you start getting droopy eyes, you look tired. Now, this one, in my notes, I just titled Guinness World Record, and I did very briefly touch on this earlier in the episode a few minutes ago. A guy named Randy Garner has gone the longest without any sleep. At the very least, he is the only one who has been documented to stay awake for almost a week and a half. When he was a teenager in 1964, he stayed up for 11 days and 24 minutes. He was supervised and documented by professional sleep researchers. Randy claims that he was able to easily recover with some good nights of sleep and didn't suffer from any ill effects of sleeplessness. Although he did have hallucinations and paranoia. Oh, I just also want to briefly mention a very common hallucination for people who are sleep deprived is spiders, and I read somewhere that he did end up seeing spiders at one point. The Guinness World Records no longer hand this award out due to the health risks, and what I could find is that Randy Gardner is still the record holder and he will be for basically ever. So yeah, it seems like the longest documented no sleep does go to Randy Gardner for 11 days and 24 minutes. Next, again, this is just what I titled it in my notes. No sleep for charity. In 1959, a radio host by the name of Peter Tripp decided to stay awake for a children's charity. He was going to stay awake for 201 hours and basically broadcast his show on the radio for that long. Because of the length he was going to run his show, Peter was monitored by several scientists and physicians. He was reportedly doing well for the first 24 hours of the show, which seems to be like a very common thing for people who, are going to stay up for very long periods of time. They seem to be fine for the first 24 hours and then start deteriorating after that. However, by the third day, things seemed to be taking a weird turn. He had hallucinations at various points. There was one time he thought his desk drawer was on fire, and at another point, he thought his shoe was filled with spiders. There's a spider thing again. Those observing him said that those occurrences were happening when his brain would typically be in REM sleep or the dream state. Afterwards, he slept for 13 hours straight and he seemed physically fine. However, his family said that he never seemed to fully mentally recover from this experiment. I couldn't find exactly what his family meant by that. I don't know if he was more irritable or if just something flipped in his brain that made him different, but I could just find that he just didn't seem mentally all there after running his show for 201 hours. So yeah, this was part 2 of the Russian sleep experiment. Now, if there's any more creepypasta that you want me to do this kind of deeper dive into, see where it leads me, please hit me up. I already know that one of them that I'm gonna be doing is gonna be Jeff the Killer, because that could lead me in a bunch of different directions as well. That one might even be a 2 to 3 parter and not just a 2-parter. So, but if there's any other ones besides Jeff the Killer that you want me to look into and, do this deep dive on, see where it takes me, again, let me know. And I know I kind of said this before, but my Patreon is coming, I promise. It's just been a little bit hectic for me, so I'm hoping to get that up and running by August at the absolute latest, but I don't want to promise anything. As usual, I will keep you guys posted with that as well. Now, with all of that being said, I will see you guys next week. Hope you guys stay safe and keep being creepy.